Just firstly going to hand over to Zach, who's going to start us off with some. Great, thank you, Zach. Yeah, so we're in for another treat this evening. We've got Aryavachan again with the fourth talk on the spiritual faculties, treasure trove of mind. Oh, he's got a very appropriate background for that as well, hasn't he? So yeah, I've just been aware recently for a number of reasons about really just like the richness of the Buddhist tradition, just how very sort of rich the Buddhist tradition is. And yeah, well, I guess because Buddhism is a sort of universal human religion, it then manifests in a number of ways throughout different cultures, and it expresses itself in different ways through different cultures. And I think Aryavachan really sort of seems to appreciate how Buddhism expresses itself. And my experience is that he sort of really draws on the richness of the whole Buddhist tradition when he's sharing the Dharma with us. And also he specifically draws on the richness of the Buddhist tradition within the West. So yeah, he draws on what's significant in our culture. And he weaves that into his Dharma talks, which I really enjoy. You know, I learn so much more than the Dharma when I hear Aryavachan talking. So yeah, it's just a real pleasure to introduce him for this fourth talk. Those of you that have been here for the first three will know that you're in for a treat, and to get your notebooks out. But yeah, just really enjoying Aryavachan's energy and commitment to this series. So I'll hand over to you. Thanks, Aryavachan.
Thank you very much, dear Kusala Devi. Yeah, I can echo what has been said before. Welcoming those of you, especially those of you who are here for first time. This might be your first Sangha night. I haven't been able to sort of scan the gathering tonight, but I trust what those who have preceded me have said. And yeah, this has been a journey, definitely. This last 3 weeks of exploring this mandala of personal development. So we are coming tonight into a very special limb, if you want, or area of this mandala. Maybe aspect will be a better word, which is the most directly connected with the mind. Yeah, so that's why the title of the talk tonight is a treasure trove of mind. And also echoing a bit what Kusala Devi just said about the richness of the Dharma. Yeah. I think there is a direct relationship between the richness of the Dharma and the richness of our minds, yeah? The treasures, the hidden treasures of our mind. In the first talk, I was talking about Shraddha, and I was talking about faith. Yeah? And one of the things that in the Buddhist tradition is encouraged is to have faith in the powers of the Buddha. And that for me is always a very interesting invitation to ponder about, and it's one that it doesn't fall easily with me, partly because of my background. I was raised Catholic, and I don't want to believe in the Buddha as is expected to believe in a God figure, for example. Yeah. So when I think of the powers of the Buddha, I usually think of powers that I can relate to. Yeah. So two of the powers that I mentioned that evening were those of the Buddha conquering his fears, yeah, working with fear, and the Buddha also having that power of receptivity, yeah, and being able to recognize these 5 spiritual faculties that we are exploring in this series in others, yeah, and therefore becoming receptive to their teachings, to their example. But there is another very important power of the Buddha that I enjoy, and it's partly why we have the Dharma nowadays, you know. And the Buddha had the particular power of being able to communicate the truth, to communicate the reality of his insight. Yeah. So some people say, this might be a bit of an exaggeration, that the Dharma, they are in the Buddhist tradition, there are around 80,000 different teachings. Yeah? So 80,000 different ways of communicate this truth, this realization, this insight that the Buddha had. But it doesn't matter really how many it's vast. Yeah? There are many different ways in which we try to evoke the vastness of the Dharma. We talk of the ocean, for example, the Dharma being like an ocean, with different creatures. Sangha talks about that, the Sangha being a sort of an embodiment of that ocean, and being creatures. In the Sangha are wonderful and fantastic, marvelous creatures, monsters even, sea monsters. But this title, Treasure Trove of Mind, I borrowing this title from one of our teachers in Triratna, a meditation teacher called Kamalashila, who wrote a book, a very good book about meditation called Buddhist Meditation. And I recently did a retreat with him where we were looking at the Abhidharma, which is a particular application of the Dharma, looking at, it's called sometimes Buddhist psychology. I mentioned this at the beginning also of this series. But Kamalashila says, he is a meditation teacher, so he knows what he's talking about. He says, in meditation, we can also observe in detail how certain elements of experience are continuously present, while others manifest only under certain conditions. Some states are clearly good to have, others really aren't. A lot of our inner content got there because of habits, but not all. Our mind is a menagerie of complex, wondrous, and dangerous animals. To realize awakening, we need to recognize and understand them and navigate the potentials and potholes of the mind. Yeah. So really this journey that you have undertaken with us in the Nottingham Buddhist Center, in the Triratna Sangha, is a journey of discovery. Yeah. It's an external journey. Yeah. So you've been doing, some of you recently finished your introductory courses, your follow-up courses. Some of you have been coming along for longer than that. And that has that element of, coming into contact with others. But in as much as had that external element is an internal and inner journey. Yeah. And that's where we are going to be going tonight. Yeah, this is the area that we're going to be exploring tonight. So I'm going to start by showing you a bit, in the spirit of also doing a bit of a recap of what we've been doing, just showing you a few slides. So bear with me for a moment. Yes. So hopefully all of you can see this. So just going through what we have seen so far in the series. So we started looking at faith or Shraddha in that first talk. Shraddha being our response to the beauty of the ideal. I really like this, this definition that Bhante Sangharachita gives of Shraddha. And we look at two particular figures, I just mentioned two particular figures, Ratnasambhava and Mamaki in relation to Shraddha. Then we look at vigor or virya, energy, energy in pursuit of the good. And in relation to that figure, in relation to that quality, I evoked two figures, Amoghasiddhi and Grintara. And last week, we were looking at Sriti or Sati, mindfulness. And we look at Vairokshana and Akashadat Vishvari. Never easy to pronounce. And the particular quality that we explored last week of mindfulness was that of recollecting, remembering, recollecting. Yeah. We are going to look at mindfulness again tonight in the context of this exploration of samadhi, but from a different angle. So tonight we're going to be looking at samadhi, which in this context of the 5 spiritual faculties can be translated as concentration. And the two figures that we are going to be evoking, if you want, are those of Amitabha and Pandaravasini, the Buddhas of the West, who are red in color. Yeah. By the way, something that I forgot to mention last week is that there is a lot of material that we have given already in relation to these figures, these more mythical or archetypal figures. Yeah. So later on tonight, I'm going to put in the chat box some links for talks that we have given in this format, this video Zoom format here. There is a series that we did last summer where there was a few of us exploring these different figures, archetypal figures. And in particular with Amitabha and Pandaravasini, there is a talk that I gave a year ago, just before we went into the first lockdown and we decided to close the center, exploring the symbolism of Amitabha and Pandaravasini. I just want to say a couple of things about these figures. So, because this is, in a way, this is the opening for what we are going to be doing next week in the last talk of this series. So these Buddhas, they're usually a male and a female Buddha. So all these names that you have here, they represent a male and a female Buddha. But they have a plethora of associations with different things. Yeah? So they usually have an animal, they usually have an element, they usually have a quality, a mudra, a mantra. Yeah. I'm going to say a bit more about mudras and mantras later on today as well. But this figure in particular, these two figures, their element is that of fire. Yeah? We were looking at fire in the last few weeks. We've been looking at that heat, the heat that comes from emotions. Particularly, we're looking at hatred. Yeah? We also mentioned this quality of tapas or heat that is created when we meditate or when we apply certain discipline into our practice, or tapasya. Yeah, that's another word. And then, but something that I wanted to mention tonight is the animal that is associated with these figures, which is that of the peacock. Yeah. And the importance of the peacock here is that the peacock apparently has the capacity of eating snakes. Yeah? So it has some level of immunity to poison. Yeah? And when I say snakes, I mean poisonous snakes. Yeah? And that's a very important faculty of these figures, of these archetypal or mythical figures, which is that of transforming, being able to transform poison into wisdom. Yeah? I might say a bit more about Amitabha in a moment. I just want to show you the next slide. So we also been feeling this tree, yeah, the poisonous tree of the 6 kleshas. And klesha, again, is a word that can be translated as poison, yeah, stain. And what we've been doing throughout this series, if you go back and look at the series, you see that slowly throughout the series, we've been feeling this slide. Yeah? So you can imagine this is avidya is the root of the tree. Drishti or views are the trunk of the tree. And you can imagine the other 4 main kleshas, Vichikitsa, Mana, Pratika, and tonight Raga. They are sort of branches of this tree, yeah. And from those branches, some leaves or fruits come out. Yeah. So I'm not going to read all of them, but just leave it there in the screen for you to look at. But tonight, the particular klesha that we are going to be deepening into is that of raga, or attachment. Can be translated as attachment, passionate greed. Cupidity attachment is one of the translations that Bhante Sangha gives to this term. It can be an emotion that is close to raga. It's not totally raga, but it's close to raga. Is that of infatuation. Yeah, when we fall into this the passion of romantic sexual love. Yeah. And this is there's a few fruits here in this branch of the tree. So there is Maya, or slyness, concealment, and Satya, Shathya, pretense, hypocrisy, or dishonesty. And the main thing with this is that these are emotions, these are qualities, if you want, not negative, not positive, but negative qualities that we can relate to, that we have an experience of, to some extent, at some point in our lives. We have experienced some of this. In particular, the one that I want to look at now is that of Maya, or the seed. So one of the things that it says that we do with the Dharma, when we train our minds, when we apply in our minds through meditation, through the study of the Dharma, is that we cut through the veil of Maya, or deceit. So there is something that is obstructing our view of reality as, or seeing things as they really are. This sense of seeing, vision is very strong in the Buddhist tradition, very strongly evoked in the Buddhist tradition. But this deceit also has to do with the way we invest our energy and our time to keep an appearance, a way of presenting ourselves into the world. So we are not honest, basically. We are, well, sometimes we say what people want to hear. Some people have a very good talent, an amazing talent to find, to very easily figure out what others want to hear. So we might be good at that. Particularly, this is deceit around status, deceit around power. So it is the way that we present ourselves to preserve a sense of power or a sense of status in relation to others. So let me stop this for a bit. And then, I'll go back there in a moment. Yes. So coming back to Amitabha, something very important as well is this idea of love. So the meditation that we did tonight that was out of the Metta Bhavana, and Kemasiri read the Karaniya Metta Sutta, which is always beautiful, especially the way that Kemasiri read it tonight. Is entering into that space of calming our senses, of creating a certain momentum with our concentration, and then bringing a reflection based on wisdom. But there is a very close connection between love and hatred. You usually hear that expression, it's a love-hatred relationship, for example. I want to read something from Bhante Sangarachita, which is can be a bit surprising for some of you, but well, let's see what you think. But Sangarachita says, the greatest hatred often occurs between people who are supposedly very close to one another, between children and parents, between husband and wife, between people of the same religious tradition, and even between members of the same spiritual community. It's interesting, isn't it, that when we think of coming into contact with a community of people, like-minded people, that we might think that we are not going to experience negative emotions. We are not going to experience anger. We are not going to experience hatred. But it can be quite challenging. So it's not that that's a characteristic of the spiritual community per se, but the spiritual community is made of human beings. So when we enter into contact with these groupings, with these arrangements of people, well, we are bringing our lights and our shadows. So last week we were looking at nostalgia, for example, that longing for what we belong to. And we usually identify with the light. We belong to the stars. That's what we say. We are stardust, star stuff. But we have shadows as well. And the main thing with this series and with the Dharma in general is that my intention is that we have tools that enable us to take responsibility for that we bring in our interaction to others. I'm going to mention a playwright, a German playwright that I came into contact with very early on in my life when I was into theater. This is the German playwright Bertolt Brecht. And something very interesting that he reflects, it's a very short thing, but he reflects that war is like love. It always finds a way. Yeah. So we don't have to despair. Yeah. As much as there is hatred in the world, there is suffering in the world. So we also were reflecting today about the situation of our brothers and sisters in India and around the world. Yeah. There is a lot of suffering. Well, there is always as well, there is hope. Yeah. There is faith. There is a movement in the direction of the stars, if you will. But when we were looking at our negative emotions, I say that hatred, and this was quoted in Bhante as well, hatred is the experience of pain accompanied by the idea of an external cause. Yeah. So we experience pain and we look for a cause, a reason, a root. Yeah. Another way of describing samsara is our tendency to blame others. Yeah. So we are always looking for somebody to point at. Yeah. Somebody is responsible for our suffering. Yeah. The interesting thing is that the Dutch philosopher Spinoza described love in very similar terms. Yeah. So he says that love is the experience of pleasure accompanied by the idea of an external cause. So the mechanics of love and hatred might be very similar. Yeah. So as much as we have an object of desire, we can have an object of hatred. Yeah. And the main thing here is that we transform the relationship with the object. Yeah. In a way, we melt down the barrier that distinction between object and subject we lose that up with our practice. Okay, and something very important, when we are in the Sangha is that this area of communication. Yeah. So last week, I also brought the symbolism of the Vajra, yeah, this figure, this three-dimensional figure that represents energy. Yeah. So I want to show you a couple of images, 2 or 3 images of a figure that represents this quality of, let's see if I can, yeah. Okay. This quality of communication, yeah. We in relation to others. So this is a very beautiful being in the Buddhist tradition called Vajra Yogini. And similar to the figure that I presented to you last week, that of Vajrapani, she is surrounded by these flames, again, fire, yeah, heat, the flames that transmute samsara into nirvana, if you want. Yeah. And she is in this sort of ecstatic dance. She has conquer defilements, conquer poisons, conquer the enemies of the Dharma, the enemies of the truth. And she's holding something that is called the Vagina Chopper. So it's a Vajra-inspired instrument or tool. Yeah. And there are a few Vajras in that figure. If you look at, at her head, her head is crowned with a Vajra, and she's holding this staff with a Vajra as well in there. And she's drinking from this school cup, which is filled with amrita, with the nectar of immortality, yeah, the nectar of the gods. But the main thing here is that she represents energy as well, and it's an ecstatic energy. It's the energy that comes from transcending the limitations of conditioned existence. Yeah. It's the energy as well that is embodied in communication, in real communication, when we really go beyond our limitations, you know, beyond our ideas that, in a way, sort of stunt our energy. Yeah. But yeah, that's a figure that is full of energy. Yeah, is something, there is something fierce as well in this figure, you know, but it's enjoyable. The fierceness is enjoyable. Yeah. But something I wanted to reflect as well on is that this idea that I brought last week about the holding of the Vajra. Yeah. So we have two pairs of hands here, one is holding a Vajra and the other is holding a bell. A bell with the ending, the top ending of the bell is a Vajra, or it's a half of a Vajra. And something very important that I want to bring is this reflection of how we hold our energies, yeah? How we hold anger, how we hold hatred. Yeah? So these pair of hands belong to one of the figures that I introduced as well, or I mentioned last week, that of Vajrasattva. And that is also a good talk given by my friend Bodhinaya on the Vajra and the bell. I'm going to give you the link for that later on tonight. And also, this is a figure that I showed last week. This is just this holding, very poised, elegant holding of the Vajra. Yeah. And I show you these two representations of Vajrapani, the rawful Vajrapani and the peaceful Vajrapani. So Vajrapani can hold the Vajra as well, very elegantly and poised, and with a sense of ease. Yeah, it's a sense of a full embodiment of the quality. Actually, when I think, I'm going to stop there now. So somebody that I really think that embodies that poise and that elegance is Kusala Devi, actually. I really enjoy watching Kusala Devi's talks, because there is a real sense of, it's a pose, it's an embodiment of something, you know, that is very refined, but it's like the Vajra, it can cut through. Yeah. So that's it. Let's see, let me see, how are we doing? Okay. Great. Let's see. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So let's go back to the slides then. And I just want to show you this, just going a bit more in detail into this area of the Vajra. So last week we look at Vajra in terms of energy, and this week I want us to look at Vajra in terms of these qualities that we're going to be exploring. So far, when we're looking at that, you know, that first slide, let me just go back there. This first slide, when we were looking at these pairs of figures. Yeah. So this is called the Phi Buddha Mandala. Yeah. And there is, in that series of talks that I mentioned before, there is a little introduction to the Phi Buddha Mandala as a symbol in itself. But these two figures, those of Ratnasambhava and Amoghasiddhi, they emerged together around, in the Tantra, around the late 7th century, early 8th century. Yeah. So the latest figure to emerge in this mandala is that of Vairochana, which is at the center. Vairochana is like the king, yeah, of this mandala. And what we are going to be doing in these next 2 weeks, tonight and next week, is looking at the elders, if you want, of the mandala, which are Amitabha and Akshobhya, the blue Buddha. So Samadhi can be translated as absorption or concentration, as I said before. But also, usually samadhi, the word samadhi is used to refer to meditation in general. And Amitabha, the Red Buddha, is the Buddha of meditation. So that mudra, those figures that I showed you a moment ago with these hands holding instruments with a particular gesture, that's a mudra. It's a shape, a particular shape, especially of the hands, but it can be the whole body, that represent a quality of the enlightened mind. So it's a mudra in particular, the meditation mudra, which Amitabha has, that represents meditation. It represents the merit that is gained, the tapasya, if you want, that is gained through meditation. So samadhi, this samadhi is with capital S, similar with the prajna here with capital P, and this sriti or sati with capital S and S. But this can be understood as well in a much more ordinary sense, so with a little s. So samadhi is just a certain level of absorption or concentration that we develop, we encounter when we are focusing our attention on something. So the quality of sati this week is that of one-pointed attention, a one-pointed mind. And when we do that, when we manage to concentrate our minds for a period of time, in an object, we start to gain a little insight, insight with a little I, appreciation and understanding, especially understanding. So let's say, for example, that we are just doing something. We are writing a letter. So we need certain level of concentration in order to put our ideas together. And in the process of concentration that comes from that one-pointed attention, there might be a level of understanding of what we want to say, or the process of writing the letter. And that's a very mundane example. This quality of sati, with these two, samadhi and prajna, with little initial letters, is very common in the world. So an athlete, for example, and a sports person, they need that one-pointed attention to concentrate in what they want to do and to understand deeply what is that they want to do. So in a way, this vajra can be neutral. In another way of saying that is, it might not be dharmic. It might not be in line with the truth that the Dharma is trying to communicate. For example, another way of talking that is a bit more, clarifies a bit the example that I'm trying to make here is that of the hunter, or a sniper, that are waiting for their prey, their target, with a one-pointed attention. They need a level of concentration. They need a level of control over their bodily functions, about their emotions, their thinking processes. And they need a level of prajna, or knowledge, in order to be able to effectively kill the prey or eliminate the target that they want to eliminate. But something very important, I mean, this can be easily, translate into what we are trying to do with our journeys in the spiritual life. So something very important, for example, that happens in samadhi is as we try to meditate. I really like the way Kemasiri was introducing the meditation today, talking about the ethical implications of our practice. As soon as we sit and we close our eyes, what can happen first is that we start to experience the consequences of our actions in the world. So we start to experience the law of karma. So samadhi could be just a space where we are able to come into contact, a deeper realization of that truth. So the prajna that emerges there is that of, it's a very sort of practical knowledge, or even wisdom. We can use the word wisdom here, practical wisdom. Just understanding that our actions have consequences. But we need probably a certain level of reflection. Yeah? For example, we can use the precepts, the 5 precepts, one at a time, to poise our to place our attention on. Okay, let me look at your faces before I carry on. See how is the energy in the virtual room. Okay, there are some smiles. So I'm going to carry on with this. So, and this is in the spirit of doing a bit of a recap. I want to remind you of what we looked at last week. So last week we were looking at this sort of vertical Vajra, yeah? With Chanda, that emotion that we were looking at in the second week of the series, that interest, enthusiasm, eagerness, desire, yeah, desire for the truth sometimes, okay? Or it might be just desire, you know, as simple as a desire, with a certain level of recollection or capacity to remember what is that we are chasing after, and that settled engagement that is represented by Adimoksha. Yeah. So this is something that we looked at last week. I'm not going to say much more about this, but I just want to bring these two axes together. And this is something that is very, very important for tonight. So these 5 qualities are called the intensifiers in the Buddhist tradition. I want also to recommend you, a moment ago I mentioned Kusala Devi and her talks, and I really want to recommend you a talk given by Kusala Devi 4 weeks ago called The Root of Conflict and the Path to Freedom. And I'm going to put the link to that talk in a moment in the chat box. And in that talk, Kusala Devi was looking at something that in the Buddhist tradition is called the present mental ends, though I believe Chiluk just had 4 of them. But that talk, I'm not going to say much more about that talk, but that talk is a very good companion piece to this series, and especially to this area that we are exploring tonight, and right now what you have in front of you in your screen. So there's a progression here of energy, a movement in our energy that we can explore. And we're going to do a little experiment in a moment around this. So we need some level of emotional engagement, yeah, to get on with things, with anything really, you know. Even when we are laying down in the morning in the bed, we need a bit of emotional engagement to get out of the bed. Yeah? And we need that energy to settle somehow into a resolve in order to keep functioning. Yeah? Mindfulness or satience really is at the center of the whole thing. Is here. Yeah? And what we need is a certain level of attentiveness or recollection of what is that we want to do. Sorry, that's me clicking the wrong place. And then when there is a certain momentum with our energy, yeah, in anything that we are doing, well, we get a little sense of absorption or concentration, yeah. And that from that absorption concentration, we can penetrate, we can understand. There is a certain level of understanding or depth that we get with whatever we are doing. Yeah. So you can apply this. You can try to experiment with this in your own time. But I want to try and do something with you right now. So I don't know how many of you have one of these. It's a Japamala. Maybe some of you have a Japamala next to you. It's a tool. If you have a Japamala nearby, just grab it. It's going to be very useful for this exercise. If you don't have a Japamala, it doesn't matter. I promise you don't need it for what we're trying to do. But an idea that we explore in our introductory courses is that this idea of action, action is layer in the Buddhist tradition. So Action, there is bodily action, it's action with our bodies. But action is also, well, speaking, the speech, yeah, talking, sounds, and is the mind. Yeah. So there are some practices that we do in the Buddhist tradition that try to engage as many aspects of our experience as possible. Yeah. So one of them is mantra chanting. Yeah. So some of you, I believe everybody here has been introduced to mantras already. Yeah. So there's some people nodding in the screen. So if you have learned a mantra, I'm not going to give you too many prompts to this. You know, if you have a mantra that you remember right now that you want to do, you don't need to unmute yourself. This is something that, you know, we are going to do in the privacy of where we are at the moment. So we are going to be chanting mantras in a moment. But the idea is that we engage those 5 intensifiers. When we are chanting a mantra, well, we need that first emotional engagement, that chanda, yeah? That sense of recollecting what is the purpose, and maybe reminding ourselves of the meaning of the mantra, or meaning is not so important with mantras, but maybe the connection with the figure, with the archetypal, the mythical figure that the mantra comes from. Maybe there is a sense of resolve, you know, in continuing this. So we're going to be doing this for a couple of minutes. And then just notice if there is any level of concentration, of absorption after a while doing that mantra. Yeah. And see if you can penetrate into your experience a bit more deeply. What I'm going to do, for those of you who maybe cannot think of a mantra right now, or you don't have a japa mala, so I'm going to share this again with you. Just to remind you of something that we did last week, which I play a sound, I play a chanting, sorry, a song basically of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the introduction to the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. And these 3 words were key. Atapi sampayanyo satima. Atapi sampayanyo satima. So anything can be a mantra. Yeah. So if you don't have a mantra in your mind already, you can just repeat these 3 words. Atapi sampayanyo satima. Atapi sampayanyo satima. And since you are not unmuting yourselves, you can chant that if you want, or you can just do it gradually, in your mind, in silence if you want. And if you have the Japamala, you can use the Japamala to help you, just moving through the mantra. So I'm going to ring a bell to begin with, and another bell to finish. Noticing your connection, your emotional connection with the words that you're reciting, with the sounds that you're making, the images in your mind. If your mind gets distracted, just notice that. Noticing maybe your lack of emotional engagement. and bringing the mantra chanting practice to an end. Good. Great. We are not going to have groups tonight, but in a moment we are going to have a bit of a space just to share, whatever reflections or questions might emerge from this exploration. So just before I finish, I want to say something more about samadhi. So samadhi as meditation also has a couple of applications or emphasis, if you want. So sometimes we talk of samadhi in terms of samatha, and other times we talk of samadhi in terms of vipassana. Not going to say much more about those two terms, just that samatha usually refers to the purification of the mind. That's a very traditional way of talking of samatha, but it's this wholesome rounding of our emotions, our energies. So we are working with energy, we are processing energy. The beauty of a practice like the Metta Bhavana, the practice that Kemasiri led tonight, is that we can work with our energies, we can refine our energies, make it more and more subtle. I love the ending of that sutta because it's talking about wisdom. So sometimes we think of the Metta Bhavana maybe mostly to do with our feelings, with our emotions, but it can take us all the way to wisdom. And we're going to be looking at wisdom more in detail next week. But the other emphasis of vipassana has to do with reality. So samadhi as well has that application. There are certain practices that we do that can take us there. And I'm going to be looking at vipassana a bit more next week as well. Just to say something before I finish, is that something that is associated with samadhi as samatha is this idea of the absorptions, the meditative absorptions or dhyana states. So maybe some of you have heard this word before, dhyana. And it's just a description of certain qualities that we can experience in our minds, in our mental states, when we gather certain level of absorption. So in meditation, we need access concentration. We need certain level of gathering ourselves, gathering our energy, and focusing our mind. And from there is a whole board of sometimes incredible subtle experience that can emerge. So there are many ways of talking about dhyana, but the way that I wanted to finish this talk with tonight is talking about the archetypal ways of referring to dhyana. So that usually we talk about 4 dhyanas. It says that the Buddha master, he learned and mastered 8 different kinds of dhyanas. So the dhyanas that have survived to us are the lower ones, in a way. But the higher ones were mastered by the Buddha as well. But let's see, the first dhyana sometimes is talked of in terms of a happy, healthy human being. So an experience of happiness. And the character of this archetype is that of integration. This is a word that Bhante Sangharajita uses to refer to this. So if we are, reasonably integrated in a good day, let's say, we might experience a happy mental state. Sometimes those days, I had a friend in Venezuela who used to say, "Oh, this is a very good day to die." Those days when everything seems to go very well, smooth, and we don't seem to be clinging towards anything. We don't seem to be rejecting anything. It's a sort of a very wholesome mental state. And the important thing with dhyanas as well, just to say this, is that they are not very far away from our experience. So that's why I think looking at them in these terms of archetypes is very, very interesting. The second one is talk of the inspiration. 2 weeks ago, Kusala Devi also, when she was introducing, I was talking about inspiration, and that a particular aspect of inspiration is that we can relate to is that of the inspired artist. I promised in this series that I was going to talk about art and the artists. I haven't. I prepared a slide, but I don't going to have time tonight to show it to you. The next one, the third dhyana, is that of permeation, and the figure, the archetype, is that of the mystic. Yeah? And there are mystics in many different traditions. When you read some Sufi poetry, for example, when you read Rumi, you have a sense of somebody who is in contact with something else. I had also a poem prepared from St. John of the Cross that communicates that state of that ecstasy that I show you with Vajira Yogini, being in contact with something sublime, something beyond. And the last one, the fourth dhyana, is talking in terms of radiation, and that's the archetype, a bit mysterious here, is that of the magician. Yeah, so the magician. So I'm going to leave it there. Let's see what evokes those figures, what those figures evoke in you. And maybe we can open now a bit the room if there are any. Maybe we can stop recording now, Ian. Thank you, Ian.